Hi, and welcome back to Grade 8 Math. This is Section 3, Lesson 1, and the second video for this lesson. This is Ms. Clements-Brenton, and in this video, we will look at how tree diagrams and tables are useful for solving probability problems. Tables and tree diagrams are extremely useful tools when calculating the probability of several events. They help to organize all the possible outcomes from an event, creating a clearer picture of what is actually happening. The set of all possible outcomes from an experiment is called the sample space. For example, two coins are tossed. The results can be recorded in a table as shown. So we would have toss 1, and I could get heads or tails when I toss that coin. And then we have toss number 2, and I could get heads or tails when I toss that coin. So then I fill in my table according to what's in each row or each column. So the first one here would be heads and heads, because I have heads on the left here and heads on the top. And then I would fill in each space in my table according to what's on the left or what's on the top. And now we can write the sample space for this experiment, and we can see from the table that we have 4 different possibilities. So we have heads and heads and tails and heads, and tails and tails. Tree diagrams get their name because they start at one event and branch into another. Tree diagrams also allow us to see all the possible outcomes in the sample space, though they can be more complex than a table, depending on the number of events. We will now construct a tree diagram for the double coin toss. So I would list event number 1, which is my first coin toss, and I could get heads or tails on that coin. Then I would list event number 2. That would be my second coin toss. So if I had heads on my first coin, then I could get either heads or tails on my second coin. And if I had tails on my first coin, then I could get either heads or tails from that one on the second coin. So we'll now write the sample space, which is a list of all the possible outcomes for these two events. So I could get heads and heads, I could get heads and tails, I could get tails and heads, or I could get tails and tails. So once again, we can see that we have 4 possible outcomes in this sample space. Example 1. Create a tree diagram for tossing a coin and spinning the spinner. Write the sample space. So event number 1 will be my coin, and I could get heads on my coin, or I could get tails. And then I list event number 2, which will be my spinner. And then from each outcome on my coin, I would list all the possibilities on my spinner. So from heads, I could get yellow, I could get red, I could get blue, I could get green, or orange. And then from tails, I could also get yellow, red, blue, green, or orange. So then to write our sample space, we list all the different possible combinations after we complete both events. So in my sample space, I could have heads in yellow, heads in red, heads in blue, heads in green, or heads in orange. And I could also have tails in yellow, tails in red, tails in blue, tails in green, and tails in orange. So we can see here that we have 10 different possibilities. We can also create a table to display the outcomes for these events. So I would draw my table, and I would list all the different possible outcomes for one event. So in this case, the colors on my spinner. And then I would list the possible outcomes on my second event. So in this case, it's a coin, so I would get heads or tails. And then I would complete my table. So I'd fill in my table. So I have heads in red, tails in red, heads in yellow, tails in yellow, heads in blue, tails in blue, heads in green, tails in green, heads in orange, tails and orange. So what is the probability of tossing tails and spinning red? So I would look at my table and I would look for all the different possible outcomes there that have tails and red. So I just see tails down here, so all these along the bottom are tails, and there's only one that's tails with red. So the probability then of getting tails with red is 1 out of 10, because we have one combination of tails and red, and there are 10 different combinations in total. What is the probability of spinning blue or green? So the probability of spinning blue or green would be, so I have to look at my table and look for all the different outcomes there that have blue or green. So I have blue, I have green, I have blue, and I have green. We have 4 different possible outcomes there out of 10. So 4 out of 10, and that can reduce to 2/5. So the probability of spinning blue or green would be 2/5. Please complete the activities for this lesson.